I am Delia, 35, a patent attorney at Maxwell Technologies with over a decade of experience in tech IP law. Despite my qualifications, people constantly underestimate me. Little did they know I created an IP protection clause that would change everything. When a $399 million deal hung in the balance, the CEO's entitled children never saw me coming. They thought their last name guaranteed success, but they forgot that in business innovation trumps nepotism every time. Before I dive into this corporate showdown, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to workplace bullies. Trust me, this story of professional revenge is worth staying for. My journey to that fateful boardroom confrontation began long before I joined Maxwell Technologies. I graduated at the top of my class from Columbia Law School, with a specialization in intellectual property law. My passion for protecting innovators started during my internship at a small tech startup, where I witnessed firsthand how larger companies could steamroll smaller ones without proper IP protections. After law school, I spent 5 years at a prestigious law firm handling patent cases for various tech companies. My reputation for creating airtight patent protection strategies grew, which eventually caught the attention of Richard Maxwell, the aging founder and CEO of Maxwell Technologies. Maxwell Technologies was not just any tech company. Founded 20 years ago, it had grown from a small garage operation into a powerhouse in quantum computing solutions. Their technologies were revolutionizing everything from medical research to financial security systems. When Richard personally called to offer me the position of lead patent attorney, I jumped at the opportunity. Working directly with inventors to protect groundbreaking technology was my dream job. What the job listing failed to mention was the company's complicated family dynamics. Richard had 2 children working in executive positions: Brandon Maxwell, 32, Vice President of Operations, and Natalie Maxwell, 28, Marketing Director. Neither had worked anywhere else. Both had been installed in their positions straight out of college. My first week at Maxwell Technologies revealed the strange dichotomy of the company culture. On one hand, the engineering and research teams were brilliant, passionate, and driven by innovation. On the other hand, the executive level operated like a family business, where the Maxwell name trumped merit every time. Marcus Wright headed the research and development department. A genius with 3 PhDs in quantum physics, computer science, and electrical engineering, Marcus was the true innovator behind most of Maxwell's breakthrough technologies. We quickly became friends after I helped him properly document his first major invention at the company. The problem is, Marcus confided during one of our lunch breaks 6 months into my tenure, I never get proper credit for my work. Brandon always presents my research to the board as if he had significant input. I nodded, having noticed this pattern myself. Have you spoken to Richard about it? Marcus laughed without humor. Richard sees his children as extensions of himself. In his mind, their success is his success, and the company is their inheritance. Speaking up would just put a target on my back. Despite these challenges, I loved working with the brilliant minds at Maxwell. My secret ambition was to make partner within 5 years, a goal that seemed achievable given my expertise in an area crucial to the company's success. The most exciting project during my time at Maxwell was the development of a new quantum encryption technology. This innovation could potentially revolutionize cybersecurity, making data breaches virtually impossible. Marcus and his team had been working on it for 3 years, and we were finally reaching the patent application stage. The technology was so groundbreaking that it had caught the attention of several major tech companies interested in acquisition or licensing deals. The potential valuation was estimated at around $300 million, possibly more with the right negotiation. As I worked closely with Marcus to document and protect every aspect of the technology, I grew increasingly concerned about the company's casual approach to IP protection. Richard was old school, operating on handshakes and trust, rather than rigorous documentation. Brandon and Natalie seemed to view IP as a mere formality, an annoying step before marketing and selling. We need to implement stricter protocols, I explained during an executive meeting. This technology represents the future of the company. Its protection should be our top priority. Richard nodded vaguely while checking his phone. Brandon smirked from across the table. Natalie openly scrolled through social media. After the meeting, Brandon approached me in the hallway. Delia, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but try to remember that Maxwell Technologies succeeded for 15 years before you arrived. My father knows what he is doing. I smiled professionally while seething inside. Of course. I am just doing my job to protect the company's interests. And we appreciate that, he replied, with a condescending pat on my shoulder. Just try to be a team player. What Brandon and the other Maxwells failed to understand was that in the tech industry, intellectual property was often more valuable than physical assets. Without proper protection, their $300 million technology could become worthless overnight. As I walked back to my office, I made a private resolution. If the Maxwell family would not properly protect their innovations, I would find a way to do it myself. Little did I know that this decision would eventually lead to the most dramatic confrontation of my professional life and completely transform the future of Maxwell Technologies. The first major red flag appeared during a quarterly board meeting 6 months into the quantum encryption project. Brandon was presenting the progress report to the board, and investors a presentation I had helped prepare with Marcus. As you can see from these results, Brandon said, clicking through slides that Marcus had created, my approach to quantum entanglement has yielded significant improvements in encryption security. My head snapped up from my notes. My approach. The methodology he was presenting had been entirely developed by Marcus and his team. Brandon had attended exactly 2 development meetings, both times spending the majority staring at his phone. After the meeting, I approached Marcus. Did you hear how Brandon presented your work? Marcus sighed, resignation evident in his expression. It happens every time. Richard believes his son is a technical genius despite his business degree and complete lack of scientific background. This pattern continued and expanded. In executive meetings, Brandon would casually mention my team's findings or my direction to the research department. Each appropriation of credit went unchallenged by anyone except me, and my concerns were consistently dismissed. My attempts to strengthen the company's IP protocols met similar resistance. I drafted comprehensive new procedures for documenting inventorship, maintaining lab notebooks, and protecting trade secrets. My proposal sat on Richard's desk for weeks before he finally returned it with a note. Seems excessive. We are a family here, not a bureaucracy. The situation with Natalie proved equally frustrating. As marketing director, she had access to technical information that needed careful handling in public materials. 3 months into the quantum encryption project, I discovered she had included proprietary algorithm details in a press kit. Natalie, this information should not be public, I explained, showing her the problematic sections. We have not even filed the provisional patents yet. She rolled her eyes. Delia, nobody understands this technical jargon anyway. We need to show potential clients that our technology is sophisticated. Sophisticated does not mean revealing trade secrets. Our competitors absolutely understand this jargon, and they could use it to develop competing products. Natalie's perfectly manicured nails drummed on her desk. I think you are being paranoid. My father built this company by being bold, not by hiding in fear of competition. Despite her dismissal, I insisted on reviewing all technical marketing materials, moving forward, creating yet another strain in our professional relationship. As tensions grew, I found an unexpected ally in Elizabeth Parker from finance. Over lunch in the company cafeteria, she confided her own concerns. The Maxwell kids are running this place like their personal playground, Elizabeth whispered. Brandon approved a $2 million equipment purchase last month without proper capital expenditure review. When I questioned it, Richard overruled me. Do you think the board knows what is happening? I asked. Elizabeth shook her head. The board sees what Richard wants them to see. Quarterly numbers have been good, so they ask few questions. Our conversation was interrupted by exciting news that spread through the company like wildfire. Apex Innovations, a major tech conglomerate, had expressed serious interest in acquiring Maxwell's quantum encryption technology. The potential deal was valued at $299 million, nearly triple the company's annual revenue. Richard called an all-hands meeting to announce the news. This deal represents the culmination of everything we have built at Maxwell Technologies, he proclaimed proudly. And I am placing my son Brandon in charge of negotiations, with Natalie handling the presentation materials. My heart sank. Brandon had neither the technical understanding nor the legal expertise to lead such complex negotiations. I approached Richard after the meeting. With all due respect, sir, I should be involved in the IP aspects of this deal. The value is entirely based on our intellectual property. Richard patted my arm paternally. Of course you will review the final paperwork, Delia, but Brandon needs this opportunity to shine. He is the future of this company. That evening, Marcus called me clearly disturbed. They are asking me to prepare technical documentation for the Apex team, but Brandon is insisting on presenting it as if he led the development. That is completely unethical, I replied. Your name should be on those patents as lead inventor. Richard says it looks better to potential buyers if leadership appears technically strong. He offered me a bonus instead of proper attribution. I felt my professional ethics being challenged like never before. Something needed to be done, but what direct confrontation had failed repeatedly. I needed a different approach. That night, I began working on a special IP protection clause in my spare time. It was complex legal language that essentially created an attribution verification system within the patent documentation itself. If implemented correctly, it would make it impossible for anyone to claim false inventorship without exposing the deception. I had no idea that this clause created late at night in my apartment, with my cat Luna, sleeping beside my laptop, would soon become the centerpiece of the biggest corporate showdown of my career. 3 weeks before the Apex team was scheduled to arrive for final negotiations, Brandon stopped by my office. His casual demeanor did nothing to mask his condescension. Delia, I need you to review these documents for the Apex deal, he said, dropping a thick folder on my desk. Just standard legal stuff, nothing complicated. Have it back to me by tomorrow. I nodded professionally despite my irritation at his dismissive tone. I will review them thoroughly. That evening, as I examined the documents, my blood ran cold. The technical specifications Brandon had prepared for Apex claimed he had personally developed the quantum encryption methodology. Marcus was listed merely as a contributing researcher, while Brandon was presented as the chief architect and lead developer. Even worse, the patent application drafts had been altered from my original versions. Marcus's name had been demoted from lead inventor to one of several team members, with Brandon inserted as the primary innovator. The next morning, I confronted Brandon in his office, closing the door for privacy. These documents contain false attributions, I said, keeping my voice level despite my anger. Marcus Wright is the lead inventor of this technology. You cannot claim credit for his work. Brandon leaned back in his chair, supremely confident. Delia, you do not understand how business works at this level. Apex wants to deal with leadership, not some backroom researcher. This is standard practice. It is fraud, I corrected him, and potentially invalidates our patents if challenged. His expression hardened. Your job is to make the legal documents work, not to question business decisions. Fix whatever technical issues exist without changing the attributions. I left his office seething, but determined to find a solution that protected both the company and the true inventors. 2 days later, during an executive meeting to discuss the Apex negotiations, I attempted to raise my concerns more broadly. Before we proceed further, we need to address some serious issues with the invention documentation, I began. The current attribution could create legal vulnerabilities that might devalue the entire transaction. Richard Maxwell cut me off before I could elaborate. Delia, we have already settled the documentation approach. Brandon has briefed me on your concerns, and I agree with his direction. Let us move on to marketing considerations. Natalie jumped in, eager to showcase her presentation materials. As she clicked through slides, I noticed multiple instances where confidential technical details were revealed in ways that could compromise our IP protection. After the meeting, I approached Richard privately. Sir, I am concerned about the level of technical detail being shared before we have secured agreements. He dismissed my concerns with a wave. Natalie knows what she is doing. We need to impress Apex with the sophistication of our technology. That afternoon, Elizabeth from finance stopped by my office and closed the door. You need to be careful, she warned. I overheard Brandon and Natalie talking. If anything goes wrong with this deal, they are planning to blame the legal department for being too rigid and creating obstacles. They are setting me up as the scapegoat, I asked incredulously. Elizabeth nodded grimly. Brandon told Natalie that he has already suggested to Richard that they might need a more flexible attorney for future growth. The betrayal stung, but it did not surprise me. The Maxwell siblings had never valued my expertise or respected my role in protecting the company's most valuable assets. Later that week, Marcus asked to meet me off company property. At a small cafe 2 blocks from the office, he shared disturbing news. They asked me to prepare a technical demonstration for the Apex team, but the materials Brandon wants me to present take credit for methods developed by my team. Amy Wilson developed the quantum tunneling approach they are featuring, but she is not even mentioned. This is getting out of hand, I replied. Have you spoken to Amy? She is afraid to rock the boat. She has 2 kids and needs this job. I made a decision then that would alter the course of events dramatically. Send me the complete documentation of who developed what. I'm going to implement something in the patent applications that will protect you and your team. That night, I meticulously inserted my special IP protection clause into the core patent documentation. The clause created an unbreakable chain of attribution using cryptographic principles inspired by blockchain technology. It included verifiable timestamps of development milestones and cryptographic signatures linked to the actual inventor's lab documentation. The beauty of my approach was that it appeared to be standard legal language to untrained eyes, including Brandon's. But to anyone with expertise in IP law, it created an immutable record of true inventorship that could not be altered without invalidating the entire patent. As the Apex visit grew closer, my anxiety intensified. I was taking an enormous professional risk by inserting this clause without explicit approval. If discovered prematurely, I could lose my job and possibly face legal consequences myself. But watching the Maxwell siblings systematically appropriate others' work while positioning me as a scapegoat left me feeling I had no choice. The betrayal that had begun as subtle credit stealing had escalated into outright fraud that threatened both the company's value and the careers of its most talented innovators. Someone needed to take a stand, and it appeared that someone would have to be me. The day of Apex Innovation's arrival brought a nervous energy to Maxwell Technologies. The lobby had been redecorated with sleek new signage, the coffee replaced with premium blends, and security noticeably tightened. Even Richard Maxwell, normally casual in his approach, wore a freshly pressed suit. Apex sent a 4-person team led by James Harrison, their chief acquisition officer. Harrison was known throughout the industry as a shrewd but fair negotiator, with a background in both technology and law. His piercing blue eyes and calm demeanor gave nothing away as Brandon led introductions. "And this is Delia, one of our attorneys," Brandon said. When they reached me, emphasizing the word "one" to minimize my role, I noticed he failed to mention my position as lead patent counsel. "Nice to meet you," Harrison said, shaking my hand firmly. Something in his expression suggested he had done his homework and knew exactly who handled IP at Maxwell. For the initial meeting, I was seated at the back of the conference room, while Brandon, Natalie, and Richard took the prime positions directly across from the Apex team. Marcus was there too, ready to perform the technical demonstration, though he had been instructed to defer all substantive questions to Brandon. Brandon began with a corporate overview that significantly inflated his role in the company's success. Since taking over operations 3 years ago, I have steered our R&D efforts toward quantum encryption, recognizing its market potential before our competitors. I caught Marcus's slight grimace. He had been working on quantum encryption for 2 years before Brandon became VP of Operations. As Brandon continued his presentation, James Harrison interrupted with his first pointed question. "Your technical specifications mention a novel approach to quantum entanglement for encryption keys. Could you explain how your team overcame the decoherence problems inherent in this approach?" Brandon faltered visibly. "Well, the technical approach we developed utilizes advanced algorithms to compensate for potential decoherence." Harrison's expression remained neutral, but his follow-up question was precise. "Could you specifically address how your error correction protocols handle superposition collapse during key generation?" The question clearly exceeded Brandon's technical knowledge. After an uncomfortable pause, he gestured toward Marcus. "Perhaps our technical lead can address the specifics while I focus on the business implications." Marcus provided a clear, detailed explanation that impressed the Apex team. Harrison nodded appreciatively, but his eyes flicked between Marcus and Brandon with obvious curiosity about their dynamics. During the lunch break, I observed Natalie being openly dismissive of questions from Apex's technical specialist. When he asked about specifics of the encryption protocols that would be included in the deal, she laughed lightly. "Those details are for the technical teams to sort out after we sign. Today we are focusing on the big picture value proposition." The specialist persisted politely. "Understanding exactly what IP we are acquiring is central to our valuation, not an afterthought." Natalie's smile tightened. My brother has prepared comprehensive documentation. I assure you everything is in order. I noticed James Harrison watching this exchange with interest, his expression thoughtful. The breaking point came during the afternoon session, focused on intellectual property. Brandon had requested that I prepare slides detailing our patent protection strategy, but instructed me not to present them myself. And now for the aspect that truly secures Maxwell's market advantage, Brandon announced confidently. Our proprietary IP protection framework, which I developed specifically for quantum computing applications. My jaw nearly dropped. The IP framework he was presenting was my special protection clause, almost verbatim with his name attached as creator. Natalie immediately chimed in with effusive praise. Brandon's legal innovation is honestly genius. It is why major companies like yours are willing to pay premium prices for our technology. James Harrison leaned forward with interest. This is indeed an impressive clause. Very sophisticated approach to attribution verification within the patent itself. He turned directly to Brandon. Could you explain how you developed this cryptographic attribution chain? It seems to require both legal and technical expertise. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. Well, it evolved through several iterations. The key insight was connecting inventor documentation with time-stamped development milestones. And how exactly does the verification system prevent fraudulent attribution claims? Harrison pressed. Brandon glanced around nervously. It uses advanced verification methods that make it impossible to falsify records. From across the table, Elizabeth caught my eye and subtly raised an eyebrow. She knew as well as I did that Brandon was completely out of his depth. Elizabeth cleared her throat. Excuse me, but I believe that particular clause was developed by our legal department, not operations. Natalie shot Elizabeth a venomous look. My brother has overseen all aspects of this project, including legal strategy. He personally approved every element of our IP protection. There is a difference between approving and creating, Elizabeth responded calmly. Natalie's face flushed with anger. Who exactly do you think you are? This company exists because of our last name, not yours. The room fell silent at her outburst. James Harrison's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened with interest. Natalie was not finished. She turned to me, apparently identifying me as the source of Elizabeth's information. And you, always nitpicking and creating problems instead of solutions. If you cannot support this deal properly, then you can leave. I remained silent, evaluating my options as the tension thickened. Harrison spoke into the uncomfortable silence. Perhaps it would be helpful to clarify the development process of this particular IP clause, since it represents significant value in our assessment. Before Brandon could fabricate a response, Natalie exploded. Standing up, she pointed at me, and then at Elizabeth. This company exists because of my last name. Take your cup and get out. Her voice echoed against the conference room walls as she knocked a coffee mug off the table for emphasis. That was the moment I knew there would be no turning back. Years of watching credit-stolen protocols ignored and innovations misattributed crystallized into a single moment of clarity. The company I cared about was being damaged by the very people entrusted with its leadership. I stood up, calmly gathered my materials, and walked toward the door as instructed. But instead of leaving, I approached James Harrison directly. Without a word, I handed him my business card. James Harrison accepted my card with a curious expression. As he read it, his eyebrows raised slightly at my actual title, Delia Morrison, Lead Patent Counsel, Maxwell Technologies. He flipped the card over to find the note I had handwritten on the back, creator of the attribution verification clause, under discussion. Happy to verify. Harrison looked from the card to Brandon, then back to me, understanding dawning in his eyes. The room remained in tense silence, all attention focused on this unexpected moment. So, Harrison finally said, addressing the entire room but looking directly at Richard Maxwell, is the $299 million deal off, or is he the one who is fired? Richard Maxwell's face drained of color as he processed the implications. His son had apparently claimed credit for work done by the company's lead patent attorney in front of a potential buyer prepared to pay nearly $300 million. There seems to be some confusion, Richard began diplomatically. Perhaps we should take a short break to sort things out internally. Actually, Harrison replied, I would prefer clarity before we proceed further. Our due diligence team flagged attribution concerns in your patent applications last week. This situation seems to confirm those concerns. Brandon stuttered, attempting damage control. My team developed strategies collaboratively. Delia certainly contributed to the framework under my direction. I finally broke my silence. Mr. Harrison, the attribution verification clause, was developed entirely by me, without direction from Brandon Maxwell. In fact, it contains cryptographic elements that link directly back to the original inventor's documentation, making it impossible to misrepresent inventorship without invalidating the patent protection. Natalie, still standing, pointed an accusing finger at me. You are trying to sabotage this deal, Daddy. She is deliberately undermining Brandon. Harrison remained focused on the issue at hand. Can you demonstrate how this verification system works, Miss Morrison? I nodded and walked to the presentation laptop. May I? Richard hesitated, then nodded curtly. I pulled up the patent documentation and navigated to the clause in question. This appears to be standard legal language, but it actually contains embedded references that create an unbreakable chain of attribution. For example, this paragraph references specific lab documentation with cryptographic timestamps. I clicked through to the reference documents, where Marcus's signature appeared prominently alongside timestamps that matched his lab notebooks. Furthermore, I continued. Attempting to change attribution invalidates the entire protection framework, essentially rendering the patent vulnerable to challenge. It is a security feature I developed to protect Maxwell Technologies from exactly this type of situation. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Brandon sat frozen in his chair, while Natalie had finally stopped talking, her expression a mixture of shock and fury. One of the Apex board members, who had been quiet until now, leaned toward Harrison. James, we should discuss this privately. Harrison nodded, then addressed Richard. Mr. Maxwell, we will need 30 minutes to confer. When we return, we would like to speak with both Miss Morrison and Mr. Write directly about the technology and its protection. As the Apex team filed out, Richard Maxwell turned to me with barely controlled anger. My office. Now. In Richard's office, the confrontation escalated immediately. Brandon had followed us in while Natalie paced near the door. What the hell do you think you are doing? Richard demanded. You have potentially blown a $300 million deal. I stood my ground. With respect, sir, I was preventing fraud. Brandon claimed credit for my work, after previously claiming credit for Marcus's innovations. That is not just unethical. It potentially invalidates our entire IP portfolio. We present a united front to potential buyers, Richard insisted. Internal attributions are irrelevant to the market. Not when the value of what you are selling depends entirely on who actually created it, I countered. Apex is buying innovation capability, not just a product. If they believe Brandon created these innovations, they are not getting what they paid for. Brandon slammed his fist on his father's desk. This is insubordination. She should be fired immediately. I turned to face him directly. The attribution verification clause I created proves exactly who developed what. It cannot be altered without destroying the protection it provides. If you fire me now, I will be obligated to inform Apex that the verification system has been compromised. Richard's face reddened dangerously. Are you threatening this company? No, I replied calmly. I am protecting it, including from internal threats to its value. The clause I created ensures that Maxwell Technologies maintains legitimate ownership of its innovations regardless of who is claiming credit. Before Richard could respond, his assistant knocked and entered. Sir, 3 board members are requesting an emergency meeting. They have just spoken with the Apex team and are quite concerned. Richard closed his eyes briefly, visibly calculating his options. Tell them we will meet in the small conference room in 5 minutes. After his assistant left, he pointed at me. This is not over. Wait in your office until you are called. As I walked back to my office, Elizabeth fell into step beside me. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do in this company, she whispered. Or the stupidest, I replied. I will probably be fired. She shook her head. The board will not allow it, not with $300 million on the line. In my office, I found Marcus waiting anxiously. I heard there was some kind of confrontation. What happened? I explained the situation quickly. His eyes widened. So your clause actually prevents them from taking credit? It creates an immutable record of true inventorship, I confirmed. The very act of trying to change attribution proves the fraud and invalidates the protection. A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. That is brilliant legal engineering. Let us hope the board agrees, I replied, checking my phone for any messages. Otherwise, we might both be looking for new jobs by tonight. The next hour was the longest of my professional life as I waited to learn my fate. Would I be celebrated for protecting the company's most valuable assets, or fired for challenging the Maxwell family's authority? Everything I had worked for hung in the balance. The call to join the emergency board meeting came 90 tense minutes later. As I entered the small conference room, I found it crowded with key players, all 7 board members, Richard Maxwell Brandon looking distinctly uncomfortable, James Harrison from Apex, and Marcus, who gave me an encouraging nod. Notably absent was Natalie, whose outburst had catalyzed the entire confrontation. Board Chairwoman Judith Wilson opened the meeting. Miss Morrison, we have been discussing the situation regarding the attribution verification clause and the broader concerns about proper credit for Maxwell's intellectual property. Mr. Harrison has shared Apex's perspective, and now we would like to hear directly from you. Taking a deep breath, I presented my case clearly and professionally. I explained how I had developed the clause to protect Maxwell's innovations after noticing a pattern of misattribution. I detailed how the clause worked to create an immutable record of true inventorship, and why this was crucial to maintaining the value of the company's IP portfolio. In the technology sector, the value of a company is largely derived from its intellectual property, I concluded. When attribution is falsified, that value is compromised. My actions today were taken to protect Maxwell Technologies, its true innovators, and ultimately its shareholders. Several board members nodded thoughtfully. William Chen, the board's technical advisor, spoke next. We have examined the clause Miss Morrison created, and it is genuinely innovative. It essentially creates a blockchain of attribution within traditional patent documentation. Had Brandon actually created this, it would indeed be impressive. Brandon stared at the table, saying nothing. Richard attempted to salvage the situation. While there may have been some miscommunication about who developed specific elements, the important thing now is to move forward with the Apex deal in a productive manner. James Harrison cleared his throat. Actually, Mr. Maxwell, attribution is central to our valuation. We are acquiring innovation capability as much as specific technologies. We need to know who actually created the innovations we are paying for. Exactly, added Judith Wilson, which is why the board has reached several decisions. She looked around the room seriously before continuing. First, we are removing Brandon Maxwell from the negotiation team effective immediately. Richard started to protest, but Judith held up her hand. This is not negotiable, Richard. Your son claimed credit for work he did not do in front of a potential buyer willing to pay nearly $300 million for our technology. The board considers this a serious breach of ethics and a threat to shareholder value. She turned to me. Miss Morrison, the board is appointing you to lead the IP aspects of the Apex negotiations, working directly with Mr. Wright to ensure proper attribution throughout all documentation. Relief flooded through me. Not only was I keeping my job, but my expertise was finally being recognized. Additionally, Judith continued, Natalie Maxwell is being removed from her position as marketing director. Her behavior today was unprofessional and potentially damaging to the company. She will be offered a different role with appropriate supervision. Richard's face had grown increasingly flushed. The board cannot simply remove my children from positions I appointed them to. Actually, we can, William Chen interjected calmly. The bylaws are quite clear. In matters affecting major transactions, the board has authority to make personnel changes as necessary. We are exercising that authority now. Judith nodded agreement. Richard, you built an amazing company and no one disputes that. But Maxwell Technologies has grown beyond a family business. With investors and shareholders counting on us, we must operate according to highest professional standards. Richard looked around the room, perhaps seeking allies, but found none. The board's decision was unanimous. James Harrison spoke next. For what it is worth, these changes actually increase Apex's confidence in Maxwell Technologies. Proper attribution and ethical leadership are essential for the long-term value of any acquisition we make. Over the next 2 weeks, I led the IP portion of negotiations with Apex, working closely with Marcus to ensure all inventors received proper credit. We revised the technical documentation to accurately reflect contributions from every team member, including Amy Wilson, whose quantum tunneling approach had nearly been attributed to Brandon. The attribution verification clause became a central selling point in the negotiations. Harrison's technical team was impressed by the innovative approach to securing inventorship records within traditional patent documentation. This actually increases the value of the IP portfolio, Harrison told me during one of our sessions. It essentially makes the patents self-auditing for attribution, which reduces our risk significantly. By the final negotiation session, something remarkable had happened. Far from damaging the deal, as Richard had feared, the accurate attribution and stronger IP protection had actually increased Apex's offer. The final acquisition price was settled at $325 million, $26 million more than the original valuation. The day the deal closed, Judith Wilson called me to her office. "The board has been impressed with your handling of this situation, Delia. Your commitment to protecting Maxwell's intellectual assets while maintaining professional integrity is exactly what this company needs moving forward." She slid a document across her desk. "We would like to offer you the position of general counsel with a seat on the executive leadership team." I stared at the offer letter in surprise. "Thank you. This is unexpected." "It should not be," she replied with a smile. "You saved a $325 million deal while protecting the company's most valuable assets. This promotion is well earned." As I left her office with the signed offer letter, I passed Richard's office. Through the glass walls, I could see him sitting alone, staring at nothing in particular. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy for him. He had built something remarkable, only to nearly see it damaged by his own blind spot regarding his children. The Maxwell family would need to adapt to the new reality, where merit trumped nepotism and innovation was properly attributed and respected. Whether they could make that adjustment remained to be seen, but Maxwell Technologies now had the protection it needed to thrive regardless. 6 months after the Apex deal closed, Maxwell Technologies had transformed in ways I never could have predicted. My promotion to general counsel came with an office on the executive floor and a seat at the decision-making table that I had earned through expertise rather than family connections. The most satisfying change was the company's new culture of attribution and respect for innovation. Every project now included rigorous documentation of contributions, and my attribution verification clause had become standard in all our patent applications. The Delia provision, as it had come to be known throughout the legal department, was being studied by other tech companies as a model for protecting true inventorship in collaborative environments. I had assembled a team of 4 junior patent attorneys who I was mentoring personally, emphasizing both technical excellence and ethical standards. During one of our training sessions, a young attorney named Sarah asked about the Apex confrontation, which had become something of a legend within the company. "Were you scared when you stood up to the Maxwell family?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. I was terrified, I admitted. But sometimes professional integrity requires difficult choices. When you know you are right about something fundamental to your expertise, you have to stand your ground regardless of who stands opposed. Marcus had received the recognition he deserved along with a substantial bonus from the Apex acquisition. As chief inventor, he now reported directly to the board, rather than through operations protecting his department from future interference. "My team's morale has never been higher," he told me over lunch. "People work harder when they know their contributions will be acknowledged and rewarded." The most surprising transformations involved the Maxwell family. Brandon had been reassigned to business development, a role better suited to his actual skills in relationship building. Stripped of the ability to claim credit for others' work, he was slowly learning to collaborate honestly. Natalie's public outburst had consequences beyond her demotion. The board required her to complete leadership training and emotional intelligence coaching before taking on a new role in corporate communications. To my surprise, she seemed to be genuinely working on her approach. Richard Maxwell himself underwent perhaps the most profound change. After the initial shock and resentment subsided, he approached me one afternoon asking to speak privately. "I built this company believing I was creating a legacy for my children," he said, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. "I thought I was helping them by placing them in positions of authority. I see now that I was actually preventing them from earning their own achievements." "It is never too late for them to build their own legacies," I offered. He nodded thoughtfully. You were right about the attribution issue. I just could not see it because I was too close to the situation. He extended his hand. Thank you for protecting Maxwell Technologies, even when it meant standing up to me. That conversation marked a turning point in our professional relationship. Richard began to value my expertise, rather than seeing it as a challenge to his authority. He even started implementing some of the IP protection protocols I had suggested months earlier. The Apex acquisition proved beneficial beyond the financial windfall. James Harrison and I had developed a mutual professional respect during negotiations that evolved into regular consultations about IP strategy in the tech sector. Your integrity during that confrontation impressed me more than any technical innovation, he told me during one of our calls. Companies rise and fall on the character of their people, not just their technologies. Elizabeth from finance, whose support had been crucial during the showdown, became a close friend and ally in the executive team. Together we worked to create a more transparent approach to company operations. We are proving that ethics and profitability can coexist, she remarked, as we reviewed the latest quarterly numbers which showed significant growth following the acquisition. The journey had taught me lessons that transcended professional accomplishment. I learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. I discovered that true leadership sometimes requires standing alone, even when it would be easier to remain silent. Most importantly, I realized that attribution matters in all aspects of life. Whether in professional innovations, creative endeavors, or personal relationships, acknowledging the true source of value creates more authentic connections and ultimately leads to greater success for everyone involved. The story of the IP clause that checkmates nepotism had spread throughout the industry, becoming a case study in ethical leadership and intellectual property protection. Several tech publications had requested interviews about the Delia provision, and I had even been invited to speak at legal conferences about attribution protection in collaborative innovation. But the most meaningful result was the culture change within Maxwell Technologies itself. New employees now entered a company where merit was valued over connections, where innovation was properly attributed, and where ethical standards were upheld, regardless of who might be challenging them. As I looked out from my office window at the campus below, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. The confrontation that could have ended my career instead transformed it, allowing me to create lasting impact beyond anything I had imagined possible. The most valuable patent I ever created was not for a product or technology, but for a system that ensured people received credit for their contributions. In the end, that might be the most important innovation of all. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against powerful people who were taking credit for your work? Share your story in the comments below. If this tale of corporate justice resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of professional triumph against the odds. And remember, your name might not be on the building, but your contributions matter just as much as those who think their last name guarantees success. Thank you for listening, and may you always receive proper credit for your innovations, large and small.